I'm going to talk about what goes into a really powerful partial, what makes an editor say, I have to see this entire book. But there are some elements you might be missing in yours because you're in this rush to grab their attention and forgetting about these absolutely important details. This is part 2 of my series about Frida McFadden's The Housemaid, which was a #1 mega bestseller. She has skyrocketed ever since she started releasing her books. And then The Housemaid became a movie. And that got that book even more in front of people to where everybody's reading Frida McFadden. So what made her so successful? I don't know her publishing journey personally because she's not a friend of mine. She's just an author I really admire. And I love the way that she took a partial and really made it something amazing. What even is a partial? It's the first 3 chapters and synopsis, about the first 50 pages of your book. It's what you submit to an editor or an agent a lot of times before you submit the full manuscript. They want to kind of get a taste for your writing and see if you actually can write. And I will tell you from experience as a developmental editor that within the first few pages, you can see everything that is wrong with a book. I know right away what the problem is when I start reading a book. I once sat in a workshop with an agent where he said he knows in the first 3 sentences what's wrong with the book and where it's going to just fall down. At the time, I was like, oh my God, how is that possible? But if you read enough and you read enough early work and enough that's not really up to par, you get that sense too. You know within the first page at the most that these are the problems that the author has. 9 times out of 10, there's one particular problem that they're having, but I'll get to that in a second. Now, why would you listen to me? There's a million writing channels out there. I've sold 8 million copies of my books. I'm a New York Times bestseller too. Not a mega New York Times bestseller, but a New York Times bestseller. I've been in this industry forever, and I've written for a lot of the big 5, and I've also self-published. I've really studied the craft so that I can take what I learn and apply it to my own books. And that's what I'm here to teach you guys to do. So in my first video about The Housemaid, I talked about the prologue, which is only 2 pages long and has like 5 twists in it. It was really great for grabbing your attention and getting you to want to read chapter 1. But the author has to keep holding your attention. The prologue's not quite enough to get you sucked in to read the whole book. What she does with chapter 1 is she does something that's very common right now in a lot of suspense and thriller books. She goes back 3 months. She starts with something in the prologue that has just happened and you're dying to know how that turns out. But Frida makes you wait. Chapter 1 opens with Millie, who is the main character in here. She is the housemaid. And we know from the second paragraph what her goal is. Now, if you follow this channel at all, then you know that I go by a structure called goal, motivation, and conflict. There's both an external, a physical goal, motivation, and conflict, and then an internal goal, motivation, and conflict. You want to establish what the character's goal, motivation, and conflict is very quickly because the reader wants to know, why am I on this ride? What am I doing? Where is this going? And most of all, the reader wants to know, why am I going to root for this character? So that's what you need to establish in that first chapter, hopefully in that first couple of pages. Millie is sitting in her potential employer, Nina's living room, and Nina is clearly very wealthy. Millie says, I don't know much about labels, but it's obvious everything Nina Winchester is wearing is painfully expensive. Not just expensive, painfully expensive. Her cream blouse makes me long to reach out to feel the material, even though a move like that would mean, here's the goal, I'd have no chance of getting hired. Frida doesn't spell it out. She doesn't go, my goal of being here is to get a job, because that's like a book report. She just weaves it in with the observations that the character is making. Her motivation comes a couple pages later when Nina asks her if she has a car. I almost laugh at her question. Yes, I do have a car. It's all I have right now. My 10-year-old Nissan is stinking up the street in front of her house, and it's where I am currently living. Everything I own is in the trunk of that car. I have spent the last month sleeping in the back seat. Again, Frida doesn't spell out, I need this job because I'm sleeping in my car and that sucks and I really want to sleep in a regular bed. Here's the really good part that she does. She relates it back to the action of what just happened in the plot. Nina says, do you have a car? That's a thing that just happened. And then Millie thinks about the whole car situation. I've talked about this a lot in other videos. Backstory is triggered by what happens in the plot. Thoughts are triggered by what happens in the plot. Millie doesn't just think about this randomly out in the middle of nowhere. It comes up specifically because Nina asks her about it. There's a lot of conflict, and it's on every single page, which is something I've also talked about a lot on this channel. You need conflict over and over and over again, because conflict creates tension, and tension is what keeps readers turning the pages. Millie's conflicts are numerous. She feels like she doesn't fit in. She feels totally unqualified, and she's hiding something from Nina, but we don't know what that is. The other conflicts are more subtle, like Nina's sort of kind of digs at her and the way that Nina makes her feel uncomfortable. There's a lot of little nuances going on here that Frida works in that creates a situation where Millie is positive she didn't get the job at the end of the scene, which is the end of chapter 1. Nina walks out of the house and she sees the landscaper. She tries to make small talk, but he doesn't talk to her at all. At the very end, Frida ends on a hook. And then he shakes his head almost imperceptibly, almost like he's trying to warn me, but he doesn't say a word. I want you to hold on to that because we're going to come back to this landscaper in a second. And that's one of the cool things that Frida does. Chapter 2 establishes Millie in her basically regular, ordinary life where she's kind of getting her stuff together while she's waiting to hear back about this job. And we can see the level of poverty that she has. And what it does is it starts to really build a bond with us and Millie. We already had a little bit of a bond when we saw that she was living in her car, but we know she's hiding something, so you're a little reluctant to get too close to her as a reader. But chapter 2 really gives you an inside peek to who she is, and you're like, man, I hope she gets this job. I really hope she succeeds. And then Frida twists it at the very end because she really wants to keep you on your toes and make you question what you believe and what you see in this book. At the very end of chapter 2, Millie gets the job. Woohoo, yay, we're all excited for her. But then, as Nina and I exchange details about tomorrow, I wonder if she would feel the same way about me if she knew I spent the last 10 years of my life in prison. Stop there for just a second. 10 years means you did something pretty bad. That's not just stealing a pack of cigarettes at the convenience store. That's something pretty bad. So that already tells us that, Millie is not as she necessarily seems. So it creates a tension within the reader to say, should I root for her? Did she do something super bad? Is she going to kill Nina? Is that who's responsible for that body upstairs in the prologue? It gives you more questions. And questions are great because readers keep reading to answer those questions. Chapter 3 skips forward just a little bit past the pleasantries because we already had those in chapter 1, and Millie starts her job. The first thing that she sees is that landscaper. There's the second mention of the landscaper. Chapter 3 sets up with another twist, but it takes a second to get there. Millie goes to the job and the landscaper's there, and the gates are locked this time. Takes her a minute to get through to the landscaper to say, hey, open the gates, I'm supposed to work here today. And he pretends he doesn't speak English, and he says something to her in Italian that kind of makes her suspicious, but she doesn't know why. She's too busy concentrating on getting in there on time and doing her job. When she does get inside the house, the impeccable rich person house from before is now a complete and total disaster. Stuff is everywhere, and Millie's like, what is going on here? But she takes it in stride. She thinks, okay, maybe this lady's just really messy and I'm just going to have to clean this up. But it's a red flag to the reader. What happened in the 24 hours since that job interview? She meets the husband. Everything seems perfect. They seem like they have the perfect honeymoon life. They're kissing. They're flirty. Everything seems too good to be true. That's another way that Frida keeps up the tension. She presents this view of the perfect world, the perfect marriage, but we know there's something underlying here. We've already seen these little red flags and think, maybe not all this is as it seems. Then Nina takes Millie to her room. They go all the way up to the attic. And it's just a sparse room. But, she's a servant, essentially. She doesn't really expect a whole lot. Then she notices that the lock is on the outside of the door instead of the inside of the door, which means she could be locked inside there. Now the red flags are just pinging, boom, 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 boom. And we're thinking, Millie, get out of there. But Nina has this totally logical explanation for it, and I'll get you a key and blah, blah, blah. And Millie just decides, okay, I guess I'll stay there. But she's a little suspicious, and we're worried for her. This is the end of chapter 3, or almost to the very last bit of chapter 3. And in this partial, in these first 3 chapters, what Frida has already done is she has established the goal, motivation, and conflict. She has created a sympathetic character who has something to atone for, which is her internal goal, motivation, and conflict. I'll get into that more in another video. She has created this juxtaposition between the world that she sees and the world that is underneath it. And she's created a lot of suspense and danger for the reader to be really worried about Millie. There's also been a high number of twists and surprises throughout. Then she comes right back to the landscaper. And I've told you this before, but if you use something in the plot and it's important, you got to use it 3 times at least, because that tells the reader, this is important. I better pay attention to it. Millie gets into the room. She looks out the window. She sees the landscaper and she starts thinking about their conversation. He sees my face through the small window and he shakes his head just like he did the first time I met him. I remember the word he hissed at me in Italian before I went into the house, pericolo. I may have said that wrong because I have no idea how to speak Italian. But that little thing comes back and it circles back. I've talked about this in another video about how you should circle back because that's a really great way of creating something that is memorable and also really hangs in the reader's mind because they're like, ooh, this is a big time important thing. Nina has given Millie a cell phone, which is another way that Nina has tied Millie to her impossibly. She's given her a home when she doesn't have enough money for one, and now she's given her a cell phone, communication, when she also doesn't have money for one. So you talk about these people that have been kidnapped and put into these indentured servitude situations. That's part of how those people do it. She types the word into a browser and asks it to be translated. And now we have another kind of hint that things are really dangerous, another little teeny tiny red flag. The signal must be weak up here in the attic because it takes a long time. Almost a minute has gone by. Now, if you've ever had a cell phone and you know a minute going by, that is like a huge deal. Most of us don't even wait more than a couple seconds. Things just go like that on the internet. This must be a really bad signal. Another warning sign for Millie that she is in a situation that she should get out of. And then the translation of Pericolo finally appears on the screen of my phone. Danger. So Frida has left you with a big hook. If I was an editor or agent and I got this partial, I would say, oh my gosh, I have to see the rest of the book. And that's what you want them to do. You want them to be so dying to see the rest of the book that when they get to the end of chapter 3, they're calling you or sending you an email immediately to say, where's the rest? I want to see the full. That brings me to a word of caution. You want to make sure that you have got the entire book done before you really start actively submitting. I used to rush and just submit my partials and figure I could write the full really quickly. What that did was bite me in the ass at the end. I would submit the partial, they would love it, and they would ask for the full, and because I rushed it, it was crap, and I would get rejected. So I would blow my chance before I even got there. So you really want to try to have the book done and polished and ready to go so that when they reply back to you and say, this is fabulous, I've got to read the rest, you've got a strong, compelling book right there. It's a very competitive industry. So you want to make sure that you are giving it your best possible shot because you may not get another one with that editor or agent. You want your partial to be powerful enough to get you a request. And if it isn't, then start watching my series on writing powerful scenes. The scenes are the building blocks of your book. And when those are powerful, it makes everything else much more impactful. And I will see you on the other side of the page.